Still paying debt after retirement sounds like something that should not happen. It sounds like a mistake, a rare case, a sad exception. But for millions of older Americans, it is not unusual at all. It is normal, quietly normal. You work for decades believing there will be a finish line. You imagine a day when the alarm clock stops mattering, when the bills get smaller, when the pressure finally lifts. You tell yourself that if you stay responsible, if you keep going, if you make sacrifices, one day you will be allowed to rest. But then retirement comes, and the debt is still there. The credit card balance, the car payment, the medical bill that never fully went away, the personal loan you took out to survive one hard year, the mortgage that looked manageable before everything got more expensive, the debt you picked up helping your children, the debt you never expected to carry into your 70s. And that is when retirement stops feeling like freedom. It starts feeling like a trap. Because debt in retirement is different from debt at 40. At 40, you still believe time is on your side. You believe you can work harder, earn more, recover later. But retirement changes the math. The paycheck shrinks. The options narrow. The body slows down. And suddenly every monthly payment feels heavier than it used to. What makes this even more painful is the shame attached to it. A lot of older Americans do not talk about debt. They hide it. They smile in public, keep the lights on, bring something small to the family gathering, and act like everything is under control. They do not want their children to worry. They do not want their friends to know. And they definitely do not want to admit that after a lifetime of working, they are still being chased by bills. So they stay silent. But silence does not make the numbers smaller. Every month becomes a private negotiation. Which bill gets paid first? Which one can wait? Can groceries be stretched another 4 days? Can the prescription be delayed until next week? Is it better to make the minimum payment again, even though that means the balance barely moves? Can the air conditioning stay off a little longer? Can one more shift at work save the month? This is not the retirement people were promised. For many, the debt did not come from reckless spending. That is one of the biggest myths in America. People love to assume debt means irresponsibility. But real life is much messier than that. Sometimes debt comes from divorce, sometimes from layoffs, sometimes from helping family, sometimes from rising rent, rising food prices, rising insurance premiums, and one emergency after another until the budget finally breaks. And then there is medical debt, one of the cruelest burdens of all. You can do everything right, work hard, save carefully, avoid luxuries, live modestly, and still one health problem can knock the whole system apart. A hospital visit, a surgery, a specialist, medication that insurance does not fully cover. Suddenly, the money that took years to build disappears in months. Then the credit cards come out. Then the calls start coming. Then retirement is no longer about enjoying life. It becomes about damage control. Some retirees go back to work not because they are bored, but because they are scared. That distinction matters. You will hear cheerful stories about seniors working because it keeps them active. And yes, sometimes that is true, but many are not working for purpose. They are working for survival. They are standing at cash registers, stocking shelves, cleaning buildings, driving deliveries, answering phones, and pushing through pain because they cannot afford not to. And the hardest part? Many of them did what they were told. They worked. They paid taxes. They tried to save. They avoided asking for help. They believed in responsibility. And still, they arrived at retirement carrying balances they thought would be long gone. That reality creates a special kind of heartbreak. Not loud heartbreak. Not dramatic heartbreak. Quiet heartbreak. The kind that sits at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes. The kind that stares at a bank account on a dim phone screen. The kind that whispers, "I thought life would be easier by now." That sentence may be one of the saddest sentences in modern America. Because by retirement age, people are not asking for luxury. Most are not asking for yachts, vacations, or some extravagant dream. They are asking for peace. A paid electric bill, a fridge with enough food, a little room to breathe, a life where one surprise expense does not create panic. And yet for so many, panic never fully leaves. It follows them into retirement like an unpaid shadow. In this story, we are going to talk honestly about that shadow. Where it comes from, why it lasts so long, why so many retirees are trapped in it, and what this says about the American promise so many people spent their lives believing. Because this is bigger than money. This is about dignity. This is about exhaustion. This is about what happens when people reach the age they were supposed to finally rest and discover they are still paying for simply staying alive. One reason debt follows people into retirement is simple. Life got more expensive, but many incomes did not. That gap changes everything. A retiree may look stable on paper. Maybe Social Security comes in every month. Maybe there is a small pension. Maybe there are some savings left. From the outside, it can seem manageable. But the problem is that manageable has become a moving target. Groceries cost more. Utilities cost more. Rent climbs. Property taxes rise. Insurance becomes another monthly punch to the stomach. Car repairs cost more than expected. Medications that seemed affordable a few years ago suddenly take a bigger bite out of the budget. And when every category stretches at once, people start using debt not to get ahead, but just to stay even. That is the part many people misunderstand. Debt in retirement is often not about chasing a lifestyle. It is about preserving a basic standard of living. It is about trying not to fall too fast. Imagine a retired woman living alone. She owns an older car because she needs it for appointments, groceries, and part-time work. Then the transmission fails. She does not have $3,000 sitting around, so she puts it on a credit card. A month later, her electric bill is higher than normal. Then her prescription changes. Then the rent goes up. Suddenly the card is no longer a temporary solution. It becomes part of the monthly structure. And once that happens, the balance becomes stubborn. Minimum payments create the illusion of control. They help you avoid immediate disaster, but they rarely solve the problem. In fact, they often quietly extend it. A retiree can make payments month after month and still feel like nothing changes. The debt shrinks so slowly that it almost feels permanent. That kind of financial fatigue wears people down mentally, not just financially. It becomes emotional debt too. Every purchase carries tension. Every decision feels loaded. Even small pleasures begin to feel suspicious. A dinner out feels reckless. A birthday gift feels irresponsible. Replacing worn shoes feels indulgent. People start judging themselves harshly for things that are not extravagant at all. That is what long-term debt does. It changes your relationship with ordinary life. And for some retirees, the deepest wounds are tied to family. A lot of older Americans carry debt because they tried to help the people they love. They co-signed loans. They helped adult children through divorce, unemployment, or housing trouble. They used credit to help with grandchildren. They opened their homes. They covered emergencies. They stepped in because that is what family does. But stepping in can come at a brutal cost. There are parents and grandparents all across America quietly paying for acts of love that damage their own financial stability. They are not bitter because they helped. Many would do it again. What hurts is that the system is so fragile that one act of generosity can push an older person into years of debt. Then there is housing, one of the biggest sources of pressure. For retirees who still rent, the fear can be constant. Rent is not a negotiable bill. It does not care that your income is fixed. It does not care that food prices went up or that you had a medical scare last month. It arrives with full force, every single month. And when rent consumes too much of a retiree's income, credit often fills the gap. Not because it is wise, but because the alternative may be missing essentials. Even homeowners are not automatically safe. Owning a home can still mean mortgage debt, maintenance costs, insurance, taxes, and repairs that never come cheaply. A roof leak, a broken furnace, plumbing trouble, storm damage. These are not minor inconveniences when you are retired. They are financial threats. The house that once symbolized stability can become another source of anxiety. And let's talk about pride, because pride shapes many financial decisions in retirement. Older generations were often taught not to complain, not to burden others, not to reveal weakness. They were taught to handle problems quietly. So many retirees delay asking for help until the situation is already severe. They drain savings. They juggle bills. They rely on credit. They sell valuables. They skip care. They pretend things are fine. By the time anyone realizes how bad it is, the damage is already deep. Pride protects dignity, but sometimes it also isolates pain. And once isolation takes hold, debt becomes even heavier. Not just because of the numbers, but because of the loneliness surrounding them. A person can survive hardship better when it is shared, but many retirees face financial stress in silence, and silence turns struggle into a private prison. What makes all of this especially cruel is the contrast between expectation and reality. Retirement was supposed to be a reward for discipline. That was the story. Work hard now, rest later. Save now, enjoy peace later. Be careful now, and someday you will be safe. But for many people, later arrived carrying bills they were never warned about, costs they could not control, and debts that outlived the years they thought would be their strongest. So they keep paying, not because they are winning, not because things are improving fast, but because stopping is not an option. And that is how debt survives retirement. Not with one giant collapse, but with 1,000 smaller pressures that slowly wear a person down. What makes this burden even harder is that retirement debt is not only financial, it becomes physical, emotional, spiritual. You do not carry debt only in your bank account. You carry it in your chest, in your sleep, in your blood pressure, in the way you hesitate before opening the mailbox, in the way your stomach tightens when the phone rings from an unknown number, in the way your mind keeps calculating numbers even when you are trying to rest. That is the hidden cost people do not talk about enough. Debt steals calm. And when you are older, calm matters more than ever. At this stage of life, people are already dealing with aging bodies, medical appointments, changing routines, grief, loneliness, and the simple exhaustion that can come from having lived through decades of responsibility. Adding constant financial pressure on top of that can feel unbearable. Yet many retirees wake up every day carrying exactly that weight. Some become experts at looking fine. They make coffee. They smile at neighbors. They say, "I'm doing okay." They keep conversations light. They avoid details. Maybe they even joke about still working, as if it is just a personal choice. But behind those polite answers is often a quieter truth. They are tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. Tired of owing. Tired of stretching. Tired of hoping nothing else goes wrong. Tired of one more bill, one more fee, one more letter, one more reminder that the margin is gone. That constant strain can change a person's entire emotional world. It can create guilt. A retiree may feel guilty for needing help, guilty for not saving more, guilty for past decisions, guilty for becoming a burden, even when they have spent their whole life giving to others. It can create embarrassment. People who once took pride in independence may feel humiliated by how fragile their finances have become. And it can create fear, real fear, not abstract anxiety, but daily fear about housing, food, medicine, transportation, and the future. Fear is exhausting when it becomes permanent. And for some retirees, the future starts to feel smaller. They stop making plans. They stop thinking long-term. They live month to month, sometimes week to week, not because they want to, but because it is all they can emotionally manage. Hope narrows when survival becomes the main focus. This is where debt does something especially cruel. It can steal joy from the years when joy is most precious. A grandchild's birthday party should feel warm. A quiet Sunday afternoon should feel peaceful. A simple lunch with a friend should feel light. But debt has a way of showing up even in those moments. It whispers in the background. Can I afford the gas to drive there? Can I bring a gift? Should I skip this outing because the credit card bill is due? Can I relax today when the rent is coming up? People are physically present, but mentally somewhere else, running numbers in their heads, doing invisible damage control. And society often makes it worse. There is not much patience in America for slow struggle. People admire visible success and often ignore invisible survival. If an older person is still working, some assume it is admirable. If an older person is in debt, some assume it is their fault. If an older person is struggling, some quietly judge them without knowing anything about their history. Years of caregiving, job loss, inflation, family sacrifice, medical emergencies, widowhood, disability, none of that shows up in a quick judgment. But it all lives inside the story. Many retirees are not dealing with one bad decision. They are dealing with the accumulated cost of life itself. A lifetime of trying, a lifetime of adjusting, a lifetime of putting others first, staying afloat, absorbing setbacks, and doing the best they could with what they had. That deserves compassion, not contempt. And still, many older Americans feel invisible. They feel like the country notices them only when they become a statistic, a political talking point, or a sentimental story about resilience. But resilience is not the same as justice. A person should not have to be endlessly resilient just to age with dignity. That may be one of the most painful truths in this entire conversation. A lot of retirees are being praised for surviving conditions that should never have become normal. Working at 75 because you have to is not a charming lifestyle trend. Living on credit to cover prescriptions is not financial flexibility. Skipping meals to keep up with bills is not discipline. Lying awake at night wondering how long your body can keep going is not independence. It is survival. And survival should not be confused with security. So when we talk about retirees still paying debt, we are not just talking about numbers on paper. We are talking about the emotional cost of growing older in a system that asks people to remain strong long after they should have been allowed to rest. We are talking about the loneliness of carrying private stress in public silence. We are talking about the heartbreak of reaching retirement age and realizing the struggle did not end. It only changed shape, and for many, that realization is devastating, because what they wanted was never excessive. They wanted enough. Enough to sleep. Enough to breathe. Enough to stop living in financial defense mode. Enough to believe that after all those years, life would finally soften. But for millions, it never truly did. So where does this leave the retired American who is still paying debt? In a painful place, but not a meaningless one. Because the first truth is this: struggling with debt in retirement does not mean you failed. That message matters more than most people realize. A lot of retirees have spent years blaming themselves for circumstances that were bigger than any one choice. They replay old decisions. They think, I should have saved more. I should have worked longer. I should have bought less. I should have planned better. And yes, personal decisions matter. Of course they do. But honesty matters too. You cannot budget your way out of every crisis. You cannot discipline your way around inflation, illness, layoffs, family emergencies, widowhood, or a cost of living that keeps moving faster than fixed income. Some burdens were never yours alone to carry. And yet, you carried them anyway. That is what so many older Americans have done. They kept going. They absorbed pressure. They made impossible choices in private. They protected others. They sacrificed comfort. They delayed their own needs. They tried to preserve dignity even when the math stopped making sense. That is not weakness. That is endurance. But endurance has a cost. No one should have to spend their later years trapped between debt and exhaustion. No one should have to choose between medication and groceries, between rest and one more job, between honesty and shame. Retirement should not feel like a final exam in survival. It should feel like a season where the pressure eases, where the pace softens, where life becomes at least a little more humane. For too many people, that promise was broken. And maybe that is the deepest point of this story. Still paying debt after retirement is not just a personal problem. It is a warning sign. It tells us something is wrong in a society where decades of work still do not guarantee peace. It tells us the safety nets are thinner than people think. It tells us millions are aging not with security, but with fear disguised as endurance. And it tells us that the American dream becomes something very different when people spend their final working years still trying to outrun yesterday's bills. That should make us stop and think. Because behind every retired person carrying debt is a human being with a full history. A person who was once young and hopeful. A person who likely believed hard work would eventually create stability. A person who raised children, paid taxes, showed up, kept promises, endured losses, and tried to build a decent life. They are not just a balance due. They are not just a late payment. They are not just a cautionary tale. They are people who deserved a softer landing. And if you are one of them, if you are retired and still paying debt, still carrying stress, still waking up with that quiet pressure in your chest, then hear this clearly. You are not invisible. You are not foolish. And you are not alone. There are millions walking around with the same private worry, the same hidden shame, the same tired smile, the same question. Why am I still struggling now? That question deserves to be heard. Because maybe the real tragedy is not only the debt itself. Maybe the real tragedy is how many people feel they must carry it silently. It should be talked about honestly, not with pity, but with respect, not with judgment, but with clarity. Retirement was supposed to mean that life gets lighter. For many Americans, it never did. And that is why this conversation matters. Not just for those already retired, but for everyone still working, still hoping, still assuming that one day the pressure will automatically disappear. Because it might not. Not unless we are honest about what is happening. Not unless we look directly at the gap between what people were promised and what many are actually living. Still paying debt after retirement is more than a financial headline. It is a quiet national heartbreak. A story of effort without relief, responsibility without security, survival without peace. And for millions of older Americans, it is not a story they read. It is the life they are still living.